This is Paul Nobles from eatperform.com. I am sitting here with April Blackford. April, if you want to say hi to everyone.
Hi everyone.
So, so April, did you get your hoodie yet?
I have not gotten
Uh,
my hoodie.
yeah, I am wearing my hoodie, so I don't know if people
I
will
want
be.
to see it.
Yeah, can you
Oh,
see it?
yeah, that's the one that I wanted. Yeah.
Yep. So, we got these hoodies for the staff. Actually, it looks like in 2015 that Reebok is going to be doing some of our product stuff. And so hopefully these hoods will be available to everyone, but for right now it's just for staff and some of the people that we feature on the site fairly often as just kind of a thank you, because 2014 was kind of a big year for Eat to Perform. I think, shoot, I'm trying to think what we would have been. We probably were somewhere in the neighborhood of about 175,000, and here we are at 835,000 in terms of followers. So that's awesome. What a cool year. Um, yeah, I mean, anything interesting happening on the training front or in the forums?
I am actually on my last week of hash. This week is my last week, so trying to make up my mind on what I want to do next. I'm this type of person. I like following a program, progressive strength, or still up in the air if I want to do a cut in January. I'm waiting on you to decide if you are, so we can do one together.
I think I am. I don't know. I'm see. Here's the thing I'm struggling with, and so we can talk it out, especially since nobody's asking any questions yet. Um, so I'm sitting at about 178 and a half. I got down to 175, and I kind of gave myself that 3 to 5 pounds of room to kind of gain muscle over the last 4 to 5 months, or since I did that cut down to 175. Um, but the problem is I've had all kinds of things that have derailed me. I was sick for almost a month. Even right now, like my training is not phenomenal. Like some of my strength days have been really good. Some of the bodybuilding stuff has kind of been good. I do think that I look and feel bigger. Um, it's sort of interesting because we encourage people to use metrics like body fat testing and the scale and things of that nature. And so I've been kind of keeping an eye on the scale and kind of hitting that 178 and a half a lot, which is good. But occasionally I go up and occasionally I go down, and I probably go up more than I go down because, as most people who do Eat to Perform know, you kind of want to push that. You want to see what you can kind of get out of your body and your situation. Um, so, uh, so the idea is that I would go down from 178. Well, the idea was that at 177 I would go down to 170. And so I may take 8 weeks and then go down to 170. But the problem that I'm running into is that you know, even though I've been kind of in this state for 4 to 5 months, you know, I mean, I just got derailed so many times. But ultimately, I do think that like 170 is about where I should sit. For those that don't know, I long, it's been almost too long to even mention at this point, but um, I moved up to 181 for powerlifting just to kind of see how it would affect my lifts, and it was great. It was awesome. Ended up lifting 474 in a meet. Pulled 500 multiple times, various ways. So that was like really awesome. Kind of took me from low fours to 500, but I had to add weight to do that, and so now I'm trying to get back to that 170 range, and then I'll probably just sit at that 170 because I sat at 165 for about 3 years, where like the scale virtually never moved. And that's what I'm like, and I think, oftentimes people wonder, like, well, the scale is so unpredictable for me, especially women. Um, for me, it's really not. If I'm, kind of having, a weekend where, you're kind of eating for joy, for a couple days in a row, something like that. All I need to do is kind of tighten the ship, and boom, that inflammation goes away, and the scale is pretty much at 178 and a half. You know. I do look bigger. I think I look bigger. Vicky thinks I look bigger. But what I was going to say about the metrics is that I haven't body fat tested, and one of the reasons why I haven't body fat tested is because I don't want it to mess with my process. Because sometimes when you get that information, now all of a sudden you just go, okay, this is just going too far, and then you kind of stop, working towards the goals, and so. If I were to, make this cut with you in January, I'd pretty much have to body fat test, and, that is what it is. I hope that I gained, 2-3 pounds of muscle, in this time, but I just don't feel like, I've been able to consistently do it the way that I wanted to. But you know what? That's, we talk about this a lot, right? I mean, like, that's kind of what this is working through those types of problems, and just keeping the compass headed in the right direction most of the time. And so that's the only thing that stops me. I do actually, I mean, from the standpoint of weightlifting, I like being 180. From the standpoint of CrossFitting, I like being at 170. So that's probably why I'll ultimately want to be at 170, just because some of the endurance stuff and things of that nature gets a little easier.
Well, my thought process, normally I absolutely hate cutting body fat because I think it's boring. You eat less food. I tend to work out less because I know training as much as I do now, 5 days a week, higher volume training just doesn't work well, So I'm smart about it, and I cut my training down normally to 4 days a week and reduce the volume down. It seems like lately, especially with the holidays and work obligations, clients, stuff like that, it seems like my schedule is not as strict as it normally is. So there's some weeks that I have to, I'm forced to do 4 days rather than my 5 days. And sometimes, I have to pick my daughter up from school, and, I don't get to work out as long as I wanted. So now I'm like, well, this is a perfect opportunity. If I'm forced to change my schedule, and work out less, then I might as well do, basically a shortcut. But
yeah, I'm probably more inclined to do it, just because I just want to get it out of the way. I know that that I think 165 might be a little small, but
I agree. I think 165 would be small for you.
Well, now, I just, my frame's a little different than it was, 2 years ago when I was 165. And, I know for 2015, one of the big things that I'm going to be working on is just kind of chest and shoulders. And I've already started working on that a little bit. And it's just kind of a lagging thing for me, and I know that my lifts would go up a lot better if I was stronger in the upper body, and so that's going to be a focus for me. But in general, it's sort of interesting that what we're talking about, because I'm probably going to do it, you're probably going to do it. It's been a while. Well, it hasn't been a while since I've dieted, but it's been a long time since you've done it.
Yes, which I think would be kind of neat, just because I've helped so many people drop body fat, and then for me to finally, put the focus on that, I think it would be kind of neat to,
everybody can obviously see you're struggling. But yeah, no, so here was the other thing, like you mentioned it, that I thought would be kind of interesting. I started to think, well, I would track, and then people could look at my food log along the way. The only thing that I don't like about that is it's boring. It's like really boring. you know. And when I'm cutting, like, I don't want people to look at that and go, oh, well, this is no fun. I wouldn't want to do this. And it's like, well, no, the good majority of the time I eat, you know, a lot of foods that I enjoy. There's certainly room. I eat, close to 3,000 calories a day. I don't think that I have been eating close to 3,000 calories a day recently, though. It's sort of funny. There's this group of people at my gym that are doing like these 100 burpees a day. You know, and I said to one of them, I was like, I'll just eat less. Like, I mean, I'm not doing 100 burpees a day. That's for damn sure. Yeah.
That's like the bodybuilders who generally add in cardio so that they can eat more food.
Yeah.
They'll add in cardio just so they can eat more, and I'm like, I'll just eat less.
Well, I actually do think, I mean, that is one of the things that I do kind of approve of, is that, if you're going to do cardio, you should be adding food, rather than subtracting food, because it gets so stressful. So we do have one question. Sherry's saying she's new to ETP, still trying to figure out sites and forums and how all things work. I'm trying to find out how you get into the January challenge. The January challenge, I haven't been able to talk to April about it, because we just hired someone that's going to be in charge of that challenge. And so April, Catherine, and Maggie and myself need to run through the post. We're hoping to have this leaderboard up. It's been frustrating because there's been a couple months where we've tried to work with these people to get things up, and so hopefully they'll be able to come through, and if they're not, then we'll just use a Google spreadsheet if we need to, which I'm kind of hoping not to do that, but there's also one other option that I recently found out about. So I would expect something in the forums by the end of the week, but you totally have enough time to kind of get things rolling. To give you some idea, the way that it works is that while the challenge starts on January 1st, you start getting together your information on January 1st, and then you have up to the 15th to submit it. So certainly no hurry by any stretch of the imagination. Most people don't want to start a challenge exactly on January 1st anyway. Usually you want to kind of get through the weekend or whatever. And but yeah, I mean, certainly this is a great opportunity, by the way, for people that are coming on for the challenge, knowing that it's a fat loss challenge, to really sort of use these next 3 or 4 weeks to make sure that you're getting in adequate amounts of protein, getting in sufficient amount of carbohydrates, and an adequate amount of fat. And so you sort of have a little, trial run with Eat to Perform. The fear that I always have with, the first of the year is that a lot of people come in and they're like, oh my God, I got so much fat to lose. And they really have been eating low for too long. Like I said to April earlier, I might not be eating 3,000 calories, but I'm probably eating, 2,500 to 2,800 on a daily basis, which means that, cutting, let's say, 250 a day and maybe adding, 250 worth of walking or some kind of low intensity, is a real easy addition to end up with a 1 pound deficit. But if I do decide to track, what I will probably do is track a couple weeks beforehand, just to sort of show the difference. But I don't, it's sort of funny because, like, for you, I don't know if you would feel comfortable sharing your food log or not. Do you share your food log in the forum?
Me? Yes, yeah. I have like thousands and thousands of followers. I have people who eat certain foods because they see it on my food diary. And I actually have a logging streak of 376 days too, so I'm kind of proud of myself. So.
I mean, I just feel like, I don't do it, you know, really at all. The only time I do it is in situations where I'm cutting, and then the majority of the time I'm eating relatively free, and I do it by feel, and then I kind of keep an eye on the scale, and if the scale is up, I know that maybe I need to. Usually the scale might be up on a day where I kind of went off trail a little bit, and didn't work out for that day, and then usually the next day if I work out, then we're fine.
We're actually the exact opposite. And remember the Lean You Challenge, years ago, I
Yeah,
actually did not track most of the time. I don't need to really track my food whenever I'm cutting body fat because I can intuitively, I know how much I need to eat around my workouts, cut a
yeah.
little bit back at night, that type of thing. But I have purposely, logged everything, for basically for the purposes to ensure that I'm not under eating, basically. So.
Right. Yeah, that's the big thing, and I think the one thing that does interest me related to tracking would be just to kind of give people a good idea on um, how we're trying to get movement with the least amount of resistance as possible. Whereas a lot of people go, well, I'm just going to go down to 1,200 calories or something of that nature, and frankly, that's just unnecessary. And then you just end up getting all stressed out, and it ends up being a net negative.
I think tracking is good for people who, people who weigh themselves but tend to stress about their weight, and don't really realize or understand that your weight is supposed to fluctuate up and down, and people that tend to stress because they see the weight increase, and I can easily go look at their food diary and see the day before they might have had pizza or buffalo wings or something that's extremely high in sodium, and then you point something that small at and it tends to make them relax. They basically realize you're right, that's why my weight, and then they don't overthink the process and think, this isn't working type thing.
Well, and that's what ends up happening around the holidays, right? Thanksgiving, everything's got a ton of salt on it and stuff like that, and yeah, when you just go, okay, just drink a lot of water, um, cut back for a day or two. Like, I had 2 Thanksgivings in 3 days, and by Monday the scale was back to normal. You know, just a lot of water, some good workouts, and yeah, that was a big part of the process. So you're gonna love this question. I'll actually leave it to you, and then I'll give my opinion afterwards. I'm personally, Steve is saying he's personally sure that energy drinks aren't great for you. Are energy drinks as bad as everyone thinks, or is that just a myth? I'm assuming that he's talking about Red Bull and Monster and things of that nature.
Well, I have to admit, I do drink one on occasion. I might have one maybe once a week, once every couple of weeks, but I do like my energy drink from time to time.
You only have once every couple of weeks?
Yeah, yeah, no, I usually only have one. Maybe me and my husband will usually share one maybe on Saturday. He'll drink half, I'll drink half, and but for the most part, I've cut down. I don't drink as many. I used to drink a couple a week. But no, I'll probably do them maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks normally.
Yeah, I thought you were more into energy drinks than that. Well,
No, I'm into some pre-workout though. I got some new one that's really good. I do take some pre-workout though.
so I mean, pre-workout, Steve, is basically kind of the same as an energy drink. How many milligrams of caffeine is in your pre-workout drink?
Um, I think it's 100. I think a
Oh,
hundred. And no, actually, I think it's 200 because I just started using a new one. It's 200 in the scoop. So.
okay. Here's my opinion, Steve. First of all, um, energy drinks aren't near as bad for you as people think they are, right? Here's the problem with energy drinks, and there's lots of thoughts about this. If, for example, you're not sleeping, but 4 or 5 hours a day, and the first thing you start doing is pounding coffee and to get to the gym you have to have an energy drink and all that other type of stuff. I'm not for that. I think you should be getting adequate rest the good majority of the time. 8 to 9 hours sleep should be your priority. 7 to 9, that's very dependent on the person, okay? I drink energy drinks all the time. I don't think twice about them. I also drink caffeine all the time. I will take up to 400 milligrams of caffeine. For instance, today, yesterday, as an example, I was doing a strength session and had a triple espresso. So, that's usually what, 80 to, like 240. So that's not too much. I will go up to 400. I use Vivarin on occasion. It just sort of depends on what you're looking to do. But certainly caffeine is a huge performance enhancer. There's really only 3 or 4 things that are really well known supplements that work. There's protein, specifically whey protein, creatine, right, is one of them. We like Vitargo or waxy maize or some kind of drinkable carbohydrate, and then caffeine. Caffeine is a really big one, but caffeine is more effective. Have you ever had like a good night's sleep and then came in and had a good cup of coffee that morning? I mean, you feel like you could take on the world. That's how I feel, right? Like that's how I feel when I go to the gym. And so yeah, I mean, I'm big into caffeine. The whole idea that it like kills your adrenals, there's not a lot of science behind that. I mean, don't mistake this for me saying that you shouldn't get adequate amounts of sleep, okay? For instance, I talked about this last week, actually, that I was thinking about switching my endurance days, my long endurance days, to Sunday, and then that would mean that my strength days would be on Tuesday. And so I found out the problem with that. The problem was that I can't use the caffeine, and the caffeine is a bigger enhancer for the lifting than it is. It's actually pretty good for cardio as well, but I just found that I like lifting with the caffeine, and most of my workouts are in the evening, and so I don't do caffeine because it'll interrupt my sleep, and so keep that in mind.
I'll tell you, I'm sorry to interrupt. I had actually, one time I had given my husband, it was during his workout, I had actually given him an energy drink, but it was the full-on high carb with the caffeine energy drink, and man, it really gave him a lot of good energy. So basically it was the carbs and the caffeine combined.
Yeah, I usually do the sugar-free ones. I will occasionally do ones with sugar in it. I'm not like crazy against it, but the way I look at it is I could have a sugared energy drink, or I could have Vitargo, or I could have dessert, and so I'd rather just have food in most instances.
Exactly, that's the way I look at it, is because I think that they're like 280 calories a can, and I'm like, nah, I think I'd rather eat 280 calories versus drinking them.
So Sherry was following up from our question earlier. I share my food log in the form I think I added to my signature, but I don't have any friends or followers. As long as you post anything, like you can literally go into, what would be the best forum for Sherry to go in and say, would anybody take a look at my food log? What would be the best forum for her to post at?
Probably pretty much any of them. She can get into if she needs help with her her macros, she could just go into the getting started, help with your TDEE. She could go in there. She could post it. It doesn't really matter, because wherever she posts, I will see it or someone else will see it, and we answer everybody's question. she could probably post it in the men's section of the forum and we'd still answer it, and see it. So, she can post it in there or the Getting Jilled group and the women's group, and we'd see it anywhere.
Getting jilled is pretty funny.
Getting jacked and getting jilled.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's funny though. She was also asking what is the best whey protein in terms of quality. In terms of quality, I tend to gravitate towards hydrolyzed whey. Now, the one thing that you have to remember when we're talking about supplements, okay, like for instance creatine or whey protein, hydrolyzed whey is said to absorb better, and the reason why is because it breaks down into peptides easily, and therefore the absorption is easier, and people think that ultimately that makes it better. The problem is that it's like double the price. I would argue that as long as you're getting a good quality whey protein without a lot of fillers, that you'll be doing just fine, for most people. The reason why I do it is I have a dairy protein allergy, and the nice thing about hydrolyzed whey, because it breaks down into peptides, is you can actually have a dairy allergy and still use it with no negative effects. And so
I'm actually the same way. I use the hydrolyzed protein specifically because it's lactose free, because I don't tolerate dairy, but I have zero issues with it.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I would do if I were you, Sherry, is I would go to Amazon as an example. I mean, a brand that I think highly of, I've used in the past, would be something like Optimum Nutrition. They have a good price point. They also have hydrolyzed whey. You can kind of get both of them just to see how they feel. They taste really good. So Optimum has a normal product, and then they have a hydro product. I use Progenics just because it's something I got used to. I like the flavor. I do think the flavor of Progenics is a lot better than Optimum Nutrition, but Progenics is maybe $75 compared to, say, $55 on Amazon. So to you, the flavor might not be that big of a difference, but to me, it is that big of a difference. And so, there is a cost, thing that comes into play for certain people. For me, I just kind of got used to Progenics, and I can afford it, but I certainly don't think that they're the only product out there, or that they're head and shoulders above everyone else. In fact, the Vitargo Post, that's also hydrolyzed whey. We were selling that in our store, but we just sold out of that. But that has carbohydrate in it. You can get it, I think, directly through Vitargo or Generate Strength or whatever they're called. You can check in the forum. Pretty much everyone would know how to get it. I think they also have it at bodybuilding.com. There are some people that argue for grass-fed whey. Frankly, I don't think grass-fed whey is that advantageous, because the reason why you take grass-fed anything is because of the fat content. And whey protein doesn't really have a lot of fat in it, and so therefore there's not a huge benefit in spending extra money on grass-fed whey, because the fat is basically filtered out. But that's up to you. Normally the bump from regular whey to grass-fed whey is like $10 to $15. If that's something that you think is important to you, then maybe the $10 to $15 doesn't matter as much. So that's something to think about. But in general, I wouldn't overthink whey protein unless you're trying to buy like a real low quality. What you'll often see is that it'll upset your stomach because it has a lot of fillers. Like anything from GNC, you want to be real careful with. Like GNC specific brands, unless it's like the real high quality stuff that they sell. that will tend to upset you. I'm just trying to think. Muscle milk isn't like the best quality whey protein around.
I think some
Uh,
of the ones that like Walmart sells too, that is really, really cheap, is I see a lot of people have a lot of stomach issues from that too as well.
yeah, and so that's like the same idea with fish oil. If you buy it at Walmart and it's in like a tub this big and the peels are that big, and usually they're not really great quality. You want the one thing that you definitely want to spend a lot of money on is fish oil. You know, um, the the cost definitely matters in that instance. Um, Adele is saying she's been tracking in MyFitnessPal, and sometimes my macros are pretty bang on, but calories off, sometimes by as much as 100 or more. 100 or more is not that big of a deal. Should I follow the macros or the calorie count? I wouldn't be overly worried about 100. Um, I would be interested to know where you got those calorie, like if you get something that you did through MyFitnessPal or you did on your own, so that would be interesting to me. She did post her food diary. Unfortunately, I cannot have a look at your food diary. April can't actually see the link to your food diary, but the best thing would be to just post it in the forums, and someone will definitely take a look at it and then give you their opinion on it. But in the middle of this class, it's just going to be impossible for me to like dissect, your food diary from day to day and give you really any accurate feedback at all. But if you could give me some ideas on how you got your macros and things of that nature, that'd be good. Um,
While she's coming up with that information, I will actually respond. I typically will generally target for my caloric range, my calories, and allow my macros, as long as I'm hitting my protein. If I'm, 5 to 10 grams short on fat and over on carbs, that type of thing is pretty much fine. But keep in mind that MyFitnessPal usually rounds some stuff up. If you've got, 3 grams of if you have 3 grams of carbs in something and say 1 gram of protein, that's going to equal 16 calories, and they might round it up to 20 calories, that type of thing. So they do round things up into MyFitnessPal. So that could be accounting for a lot of the shortages, or why it's not, precisely, all adding up.
we had a little bit of an issue. Somebody signed us out of the account. Maggie does check this account occasionally, and she might have just lost her mind and decided to do it.
I just saw that. I was wondering why you popped up in two different places.
Yeah. So yeah, if Adele wants to hit us back with, I think she did that last week where she asked a question and then, she left and didn't come back. Let's see. So Cynthia's saying, okay, she said, oh, here we go. She said, I have no idea how I can speak. Well, you can't really speak, but you can ask questions doing what you just did. Yeah, so just take that in, and I'll get to Cynthia's, and then we'll come back to yours. Cynthia's saying, I'm confused as to why cardio does not help to lose fat. Is this an accurate statement? Well, I wouldn't say technically that it's an inaccurate statement. You can use cardio for a caloric deficit, but here's the problem, and this is why most people struggle, and one of the reasons why you see many of the people that use cardio for deficits, they don't tend to be very muscular. Because they're constantly in like a negative mode. And so in general, what we suggest is that some level of resistance training is probably going to be a little bit better. And so if you're doing cardio, we would like you to feed your cardio. And so we sort of talked about that a little bit earlier when we were talking about bodybuilders. Bodybuilders will do cardio so they can add in a little bit more food. That's what I believe to be the best. difficulties. And so hopefully that's not really affecting you guys, but I'm guessing we're kind of stalling every now and again. Let's see. So she followed up. I love my cardio, but I'm considering going to heavy lifting beginning January to change my routine and get back to weight loss and fat loss. Am I thinking the directions? Well, yes. I mean, certainly there's some level of both. We're not suggesting that you shouldn't do cardio. In fact, I do cardio often, but on my cardio days, those tend to be some of my higher calorie days, because I don't want the cardio necessarily keeping me away from my lean mass goals. So how does that look, though, overall? If we're cutting, like April actually talked about it earlier, but we kind of went over it. When April and I cut, we tend to take one day extra off to create more of a deficit. And so the 4 days we're working, we will still be eating, to perform. But when we're cutting, we typically add an extra day to get to a caloric deficit. Now, I don't know what you would consider cardio. On those types of days, I will add like some low intensity, walking, hiking, things of that nature, but nothing that a lot of people would consider like super stressful cardio, nothing like CrossFit, nothing like, 3-mile runs or 7-mile runs or anything like that. Because what you see is when people do that excessively, it takes a toll on their muscle. And so that's why, we're not saying that cardio is awful for fat loss. It's actually really good for your metabolic conditioning. It gets your heart going. It's going to get your breath moving. I mean, a lot of the way that we oxidize fat is through our breath, and so those things are all positive. But in general, what you're trying to accomplish is the most result with the least amount of stress. And so you want to feed the days that you're working out, and then you want to maybe take some additional days so where you can create a little bit of a deficit that doesn't end up being super stressful. You can be active on those days, but really low intensity. Does that make sense, Cynthia? Or hopefully you're still around. April, do you have any thoughts to what I'm saying?
I would probably do something similar where I basically will add low intensity on my off days. Depending upon how I feel, sometimes the last time I cut body fat, I'd get up early in the morning and have some caffeine, and I might do 12 to 15 minutes of HIIT where I do 20 seconds all out, 40 seconds walk, 20 seconds, because I could achieve that in a short amount of time than 40 minutes of low intensity. It was just according to how I feel, but I will likely add that in.
You know what I'm thinking of adding? Yoga.
Well, that's a good idea.
Yeah, because I need to loosen things up a little bit. But I live in Minnesota, for people that don't know, and it gets pretty cold here, in case you hadn't figured that one out. So I'm thinking of adding hot yoga like 2 or 3 days a week. So if I cut, that might be a good day to do on my off days, is kind of do a little bit of.
Have you ever done hot yoga? Because it's very strenuous. The hot yoga is. So,
yeah, no, I will probably feel it out a little bit, and I probably won't cut my calories super low. Cynthia did follow up and say, yes, that does help, thanks. On my cardio days, I run 5 miles in an hour and HIIT routine for 20 minutes. Yeah, see, that's the kind of thing we're talking about, where you're going to want to, like, cardio days. How many cardio days a week do you have, Cynthia? I mean, 5 mile runs and HIIT routine. It sounds to me like you're listening to a lot. So you have 3 of those, okay? I'll give you an example of advice that I gave to one of my athletes. Well, first of all, I wouldn't do HIIT um, uh, after a 5 mile run, um, mostly because it's not going to be favorable. It sounds like you're really shooting for fat loss, fat loss, fat loss, fat loss, fat loss, and I think you're ultimately really need to. Yeah, you're saying yes, yes, but the problem is that you're getting all the standard advice that everybody gives people is like run a lot, do HIIT training, things of that nature. Well, your body just sort of adjusts to that, and so you have to have a plan that includes that. Like for instance, one of my athletes, one of my CrossFit Games athletes, um, we were kind of doing her routines, and she also goes long 3 days a week, and on those days her calories are much higher than the days that she's not doing that. And my guess is that's probably not what you're doing right now. And so what is going to happen in that scenario is you're going to create sort of like this cortisol cocktail where you're stressed out, maybe you might have some difficulty sleeping, and so some negative things sort of creep up. Though sometimes it is sort of interesting with that cardio. I noticed when on my long endurance days, I usually sleep pretty good. I'd be interested to hear your feedback on that because do you have any ideas what your calories are, Cynthia? Because I'd be real interested to hear what your calories are, given how much you're working out. I mean, I would say that in that hour to 20 minutes, you're probably burning anywhere from 800 to 1,000 calories. So if you're not seeing 2 pounds, every single week, you're pretty much stressing yourself. She said, correct, not adding calories and sleeping has become less hours. My calorie intake is 1,600 calories. You're burning 1,000 calories a day on those days. So essentially, if you are eating 1,600 calories, and my guess is you aren't eating 1,600 calories every single day religiously, if you are, it's probably really affecting your sleep, really negative. You're essentially netting out to about 600 calories a day, which is very hard to exist on. And so, the question that I would ask you is, you're doing 1,600 calories a day. You're burning 1,000 calories on those days that you're supposedly eating 1,600 calories. But my guess is you are having moments where you're slipping in other stuff because, frankly, you're probably doing it as a self-preservation thing because nobody gets to that point where they're starving and they stick to it. If they do, it ends up putting them into this really negative space related to eating disorders and things of that nature. And so, those are some of the things that I would be concerned about when you're just fat loss, fat loss, fat loss, and you're eating 1,600 calories and you're doing what you're doing. That anybody who knows what they're doing would tell you you're doing the wrong thing. But my guess is you're scared to death to not do that because you feel like you're going to put on fat. And what we're saying is you need to get your math more correct. And once you get your math more correct, then things sort of come together. Have you been in the forums? Have you talked to anybody? I mean, is this all new information to you? Because this is the type of question we get from someone that's like just started 2 days ago. And so if you haven't been in the forums, that's going to make a really big difference for you. But you may need to kind of pull back the reins a little bit to actually see the results that you want to see. And I do agree that some level of lifting is probably good for you, but that lifting, it's going to stimulate some muscle building, some new tissues, and things of that nature. But if you just like fat loss, fat loss, fat loss, you're really not going to get out of it what you want what I think you probably get the most benefit from is just, taking a little bit of a break, kind of getting your nutrition house in order, and then working on fat loss. So if I said to you, hey, Cynthia, this might take 2 to 3 months for you to kind of figure out, but then you'll be in a much better space for fat loss. Hopefully that's something that you would see through. If it's not, then frankly, you're always going to get what you've always gotten. You just can't do what you're doing to your body. It just gets to a point of self-preservation. She's not really responding back at this point, so I'm just going to move on to let's see. Okay, so she did respond. Yes, I am new. Only came on board Friday. Still in the new stage to eat more. Taking 2 weeks off to reset my body and give this system a 3-month try. So the key there is going to be getting in the forums, talking to April, talking to Suzanne, talking to Catherine, all the people that basically will serve as your support system. You have no idea what's going on yet, and that's fine. You're still just trying to catch up to speed. And so hopefully this is a little piece of information to be a little helpful. And then once you get that information, you can come to all of these, but this will kind of get you started headed in the right direction. So I want to get back to Adele. When I answer my question, my goals are 170 protein, so that should give us a good idea, April, on weight and stuff. 225 carbs, 85 fat. It's 23 calories. I enter my food in. I'm at 217 carbs, 88 fat, 168 protein, yet my FitnessPal is showing a surplus of 236 calories. I'm going to let April speak to that. I think she was actually speaking to that, but we got cut off. So, April, you want to...
So it actually disconnected earlier whenever I was trying to explain. A lot of times with my FitnessPal, if you look at your entries, a lot of times they actually will round up the calories. If you go in and you add up the protein, and for example, if there's 3 grams of protein and 1 gram of carb, which would be 16 calories, a lot of times they might round it up to 20. So if you go back and look at your entries, they're going to round some things up like that. I don't know if you partake in alcohol. Alcohol completely throws your macros off. If you have a glass of wine, that usually will throw everything off because it carries a lot of empty calories. And if you notice, there'll be so many calories for that, and then the macros will either be blank or the carbs, it might say 8 grams of carbs and 0 fat and 0 protein. And it might be 200 some calories. So I would go back and double check the entries and see. It could be an error admission for the entry, a user error. So I would go back and check that. If you add up, okay.
She's asking, should she trust the calories or the macros? And in my opinion, you should trust the macros, because the calories are the things to be affected most negatively. Okay, but Adele, I wanted a question for you. Have you been in the forums?
She is in the forum.
Okay. She's very active in the forums. Ultimately, if you're trying to cut fat, and she's saying that she wants to be at a -10, -10 is only going to get you 230 calories. So if you're trying to say cut a pound a week, you need to figure out a way to get to 500. Maybe that's by adding some activity. You misread that. What part did I misread? Calories were 10% higher than macros. Yeah, no, I understood that. What I'm saying to you is separate of that. Is if you're trying to cut, okay, and you cut 10%, which would be, if your calorie numbers are 2,300 and you cut 10%, that's 230 calories, okay? It just so happens to be almost exactly the number that you mentioned that your calories were up. And so that's kind of confusing the scenario from your standpoint. But my point being, my cut numbers were done by a moderator, and I'm following her advice. Okay, that's fine. Not sure where you got that. Well, I've not really gotten to my ultimate point. Um, my ultimate point is that for most people, you want to lose 1 pound a week, right? And so to lose 1 pound a week, you're going to need to lose 500 calories on any given day. So you want to average roughly 3,500 calories on your cut throughout that week. And so we've talked about it on a number of occasions within this podcast of adding some walking, adding some cardio, things of that nature. My rest days are 1890. Okay, that's great that your rest days are 1890, and that's probably helpful because that is about a 500 calorie deficit. But if you're trying to cut 4 days at 2323 and 3 at 1890, that is really more of a maintenance strategy. You might cut a little bit, but it's going to be very difficult to cut a pound a week in the scenario that you're creating. So that's something that you would want to keep in mind, that if you're not seeing the movement that you want, she's saying she lifts 4 days a week, yoga 3, hiker ski once. My point ultimately being is that, well, one, I don't know how long you've been kind of doing the Eat to Perform thing, how active you've been in the forums, but if you have, like the scenario that you're creating right there is pretty much exactly how we create it for people just trying to normalize. But in terms of somebody trying to cut, you might tend to have to be a little bit more aggressive. I'd be interested to see if you're seeing the scale go down in the scenario that you're presenting, because it sounds like you're pretty active.
She's literally only like 9 days in.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, and we don't, I've only been doing it for 5 days. Here's what I think is the deal, Adele, and I think, because I know this is your second webinar, and I want to make sure to get to everybody's questions, but, don't be surprised if what you're seeing right now is really more of a maintenance strategy for you, but you might need a maintenance strategy. If you weren't counting before, or if you were too aggressively low previously, that might not be a great strategy for cutting, but it will be a great strategy for normalizing things to actually get to a point where you actually cut, if that makes sense. But you have to start from the right place to start, right? You can't start off, now there is an example. Let's see. Okay, we will see. My normal appetite was around 2,500. So this actually may be a deficit for you. The thing that I would just keep an eye on is the scale going down. That's something that I would definitely keep an eye on in this scenario. And then also, how are you feeling? Is your activity level, responding to this positively? I mean, any thoughts on anything that I'm saying here? I think part of it is we're just too new to the process, and we're trying to figure out too much with too little information.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
I think with her just starting a week ago, I could go back and look and see what her history was prior. She was eating 2,500 calories on average before, and now she's doing 23 and 18. I think she should see some movement. But
yeah, I think so too. She's saying, I reckon if I'm making strength gains and breaking PRs and losing a pound a week, I'm happy. You certainly would be happy. The only thing that I would say to you is you would really want to take it slow. Can you give me just, before we let's see, I broke some PRs a couple days ago. I'd be interested to know what your height is, because I do think I have a handle on your weight.
She's 5'6".
5'6". I mean, so honestly, I think that what I think you're going to find is that you should really look for 8 to 10 pounds at the most, and then you're going to want to kind of cut back. So if you were eating 2,500, and this does represent a deficit, really only get to about that 8 to 10 pounds, and then probably, take a good long diet break of 3 to 6 months before you go for 8 to 10 more. But you may also find that, hey, I'm really happy with, that weight. Like, for instance, if you were to lose 10 pounds from the weight that you're at for 5'6", is a totally healthy weight, especially for someone lifting weights and doing good stuff. So she says, okay, sounds good. I would like to drop 10 to hit a weight class for powerlifting. Well, then there you go. I mean, there's no reason that, given the information that you're telling us, as long as that's correct, you should be able to do that in roughly 2.5 months. So let's see. David is saying, I'm brand new to the program, trying to learn the basics. I do triathlon training. I'm trying to learn how this program works with endurance training. Well, I'm not sure how much you heard about the advice that we were giving earlier. Usually with triathlon training, you're going to have multiple days where you're doing long bike rides or doing swimming or doing running, things of that nature. Usually on those days, we like people to have a good idea of how many calories that they're burning, and then more or less replace those calories. If, for instance, you're training for a triathlon, we would probably want to keep you roughly the same weight that you're at right now. Usually you would want to cut outside of season. And so let's say that, right now, as an example, it sort of depends on where you are. But for a lot of people, their triathlon season starts around June or July. Okay? If you haven't been doing Eat to Perform, if you haven't eaten an adequate amount to recover from your workouts and things of that nature, you would want to start doing that for at least a month or two before you started to look at body fat composition or body composition. Clearly, fat is not super advantageous for someone that is doing long endurance work, and so you would want to get your body fat as low as possible. But what I see being very effective for a lot of our long endurance people is kind of regaining some of the muscle that you end up losing during the season, getting an adequate amount of food in you, and then using a small cut period to get down to a reasonable weight going into the season. And so usually you would have about 3 to 4 months to train to go into your triathlon season, which may or may not be 3 to 6 triathlons in that time period. So that's pretty standard strength and conditioning. You really don't want to be dieting, as an example, during the time that you're competing. What you want to be doing is have some semblance of kind of resetting and weightlifting shortly after the season, and then kind of nailing things down within about a 6-month window. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's basically how you do it. Do you have any thoughts on that, April?
I agree, obviously. I agree. It doesn't make any sense to diet, whenever you're in your competition season. For the triathlon trainings, they're very, you burn a lot of calories, like you said. I think the key there is to make sure that you're eating an adequate amount of food, because if not, you're basically gonna burn off a ton of muscle mass, in right. My opinion, if not eating enough, and just adding more stress to your body from not eating enough.
Yeah, I mean, the idea, of why you add food, obviously, is to create a better recovery environment. I mean, the biggest low-hanging fruit that nobody else thinks about is that when you don't eat adequate amounts of food, oftentimes it reflects poorly in your sleep, and you know, especially if you're trying to work on times, you know, you just don't get that adequate adaptation that's going to allow you to get better times and better splits and things of that nature. And so that's why food makes such a big difference. And you always hear things about steroids and performance enhancing drugs and things of that nature. I would say the majority of people don't need to worry about those types of things near as much as they think they do. And if they got the food component right, they would address most of the deficiencies, if not all of them. And really the only people that benefit from, let's say, performance-enhancing drugs in that scenario would be the people that have most every other thing right. They're trying to be world champions and kind of cheating the process as it goes. So I would say if you can get the food part right, the good majority of people that we talk to on a regular basis kind of don't have that right. It's sort of interesting too when we talk to collegiate athletes. They almost none of them, like if you go to like like a school like LSU or Alabama, maybe Alabama might, but you would think that these schools have really good nutrition programs, and they do not. Most collegiate athletes eat pretty much whatever they want, and then the coach, come season time, they put them through the gamut to try and make sure that they're a certain weight. But in general, they're not really great about nutrition, and which is one of the reasons why you see a lot of these athletes, as they become professional athletes, they get that nutrition component, and that's why you see the Kobe Bryants and some of these people that are really diligent about that. They end up having a longer career as a result. Wayne's saying, I'm told BCAAs are beneficial with my early AM fasted training. My schedule is kind of all over, so some weeks many only have one morning session, other have 3 to 4. So is that okay to take BCAA on that kind of schedule, or should they be taken more consistently? There is really no negative to taking BCAAs. What's interesting to me, though, I don't personally take BCAAs. I used to take BCAAs, but the reason why I don't take BCAAs is because I take whey protein. BCAAs are an incomplete protein, whereas whey protein is a complete protein. And so I would say, first of all, you're not going to really deal with a lot of muscle atrophy. It sort of depends on how long your session is, but if you're doing like a CrossFit, 15 to 20 minute with some workouts and things like that, or some warm-ups and stuff like that, I'm not sure that the BCAAs are just going to be like super beneficial for you, but they don't hurt. I mean, if you like them, if you like the flavor, go for it. I mean, it's really not a negative. It will help you, with your leucine threshold and some of these other things. Honestly, once again, I mean, we sort of get into like BCAAs and whey protein and supplements and all this other type of stuff, but really, when you look at what builds lean mass, it's being at a hypercaloric state, and if you look at what takes away fat, it's being at a hypocaloric state, or basically in a calorie deficit. So if you're trying to keep your muscle mass, the best way to do it is to eat adequate amounts of food on the days that you're working out, which is sort of our standard prescription. The only problem is Wayne asked this question like 30 minutes ago, so I'm not really sure that he's still here to hear it. I don't think BCAAs are negative. They don't have a calorie point, really. There's only a slight calories, if anything. So I don't have a negative part to it. He's saying he is still here. The one thing I will say, though, is when you take BCAAs and you take protein, and you also eat food, oftentimes you will, like even with the best of proteins, you will get like, gas, upset stomach, things of that nature. And so that's like, as an example, right, the last couple days my stomach hasn't been feeling really great. I have been, having more protein than I probably normally have. Normally I try to get it through whole foods. So the next couple days I'm just going to eat mostly my protein from meat. And then the incidental from, veggies and things of that nature. Because what seems to happen in my case, and this is purely anecdotal, but is when I become overly reliant on BCAAs and whey protein for days in a row, oftentimes it will end up with me having, kind of an upset stomach. That's, that's me. It might respond differently.
Are you referencing protein farts? I hate being blunt here, but I think that's what the actual term is.
That is what I'm referencing. Yes, I was trying to be a little coy about that. But the problem with BCAAs is that you take a bunch of BCAAs and then you add that protein in, you're dealing with, you could be dealing with some farts.
My opinion with Wayne is I think it's good to kind of have as a security for the early AM sessions. For the later sessions when he's able to actually eat beforehand, my opinion is he should just save them for his early sessions and they'll actually last longer. There isn't any type of, I don't know if he was trying to ask the question if you actually need to load them and take them all the time, which you don't. So
acid training similar to like the basic lean gain style,
Yeah.
And like I said, I mean, the most muscle I gained was early on. Okay, like everyone, we all adapt to, strength early. And we can see massive gains. But one of the things that I did that was really, really important was I ate adequate amount of protein, I had the BCAAs, and I ate adequate amount of food. And so if it works for you, I don't see any real negative to it, but, the only thing that I would say is if you start to see signs of your uncomfort, just keep that in mind, and then just take the BCAAs or protein away for a couple days, and you'll see things normalize for a bit. Okay, well, we actually got in. We try to end. Let's see. Thank you. I have to run now. See you next week. Okay, Super Wayne. I appreciate the question. That's it for the questions. I just want to make sure that I was able to get through. Let's see. Okay. Yep. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I addressed everybody's questions. Well, anyway, I appreciate everybody being here. Sorry for all the technical mix-ups this week, but I don't think that it will affect the webinar all that much, but for you guys, it probably showed up kind of weird. So I appreciate everybody being here, and hopefully we'll see you guys in the forums, and see you next week. Talk to you later.
Good night, everybody.
All right.